This program on investing under regulation crowdfunding is not investment advice.
Rising with the crowd, power unbound, change makers lead where hope is found. Superpowers for good, shaping the fate. Investors and dreamers open the gate. Supercross stands loud, proud and true, building tomorrow for me and you.
Have you wondered, perhaps as an investor or maybe even as an entrepreneur, if there weren't some ways, simple, relatively easy ways, to improve the capital markets for capital raising, especially under regulation crowdfunding? Well, my guest today has figured out a key issue that could really enhance these markets. So stick around. You don't want to miss this. Now, welcome to the Super Crowd Presents Superpowers for Good. I'm your host, Devin Thorpe. Before we begin in earnest, I want to invite you to participate actively in our Power Up October campaign. We're in the process of really promoting some of the great work that we're doing here at Superpowers for Good with the Super Crowd. And there are all kinds of opportunities for you to get involved and make a difference in the world. So check out our program at Superpowers for Good. Now, I want to welcome our guest, Greg Burke. Greg is a professor at Loyola and is really an expert on some of these issues around regulation crowdfunding and has been looking at some esoteric, but really, I think, pivotal points that could really improve the markets. Greg, welcome to the show.
It's a pleasure to be here.
We're thrilled to have you. And I think, I am excited by your research because it has such a potential to trigger some important, nuanced, small, meaningful changes in how we see regulations playing out. Let's get to the point of it, right? Your research shows that there is really relatively poor compliance with the annual report filings required under regulation crowdfunding. A lot of companies just aren't filing. Tell us about your research and tell us what you think it means for the marketplace.
Yeah, so this paper that we're discussing today shows that the annual reporting compliance among regulation crowdfunding issuers is strikingly low. So there's an annual reporting requirement that every year, once you raise capital through reg crowdfunding, that you got to file an annual report so your investors know what's going on. And we find that in that first year after you've raised money, that less than a third do it on time when they're supposed to, and less than half ever do it. And so our research starts off by establishing some of these facts and then kind of digging a little bit deeper, which I'm sure we'll jump into here, about what might motivate managers to comply with a mandatory reporting obligation. And so we not only can answer that in the context of regulation crowdfunding issuers, but also in the broader context for financial reporting here in the United States. And so we try to do that in two different ways. First, we look at it empirically with archival data and see if we can predict any determinants of compliance. And then when that fails us, despite having a bunch of data and information to try to predict it, we turned to a field experiment that we partnered with King's Crowd, who was doing a marketing campaign to understand compliance in this market, as well as promote one of their offering services to issuers to provide their annual reports and prepare them. And from that process, we can make some statements in terms of what types of things motivate a manager to comply and what might increase compliance in this market.
Yeah, it is such a fascinating topic because, what I would point out, and I don't know if you share my view on this, but I think if people were actually filing their reports, it would be a significant improvement in the market because it would provide investors with more information, more transparency, and that would have the cascade effect of bringing them back, bringing in more investors. Am I crazy to think that?
I don't think you're crazy to think it. We also show in this paper by looking, we're able to view traffic on Edgar. So Edgar, for those that aren't familiar, is the repository for these financial documents for these small firms that are doing regulation crowdfunding, as well as large firms, right? Like your Microsofts, et cetera, that are filing Form 10Ks, their annual reports. And we can see traffic from investors on this platform. And what we see is that investors are looking for regulation crowdfunding annual reports. They're looking for this information. And sometimes they're just not finding it. So there's some demand among investors for this to happen. And so we can suspect and speculate that if investors are demanding it and they're not getting it, it certainly may impact their investment decisions and the potential growth in this market. Absolutely.
I think this is an exciting topic because anything that enhances this marketplace really makes a difference downstream for things I really care about, like supporting more diverse founders. People who are struggling to access capital through any channel have a better chance with crowdfunding than anything else I've seen over and over. If we can make it a little bit easier, make the market a little more efficient, it tends to address things like climate solutions and, like I say, supporting diverse founders. I mean, it just really all kinds of stuff. What are some of the tactics you think regulators and practitioners both, let's start with regulators, but what can they do to improve compliance?
So first, to speak to your comment before, I wholeheartedly agree. I think financial reporting at its core is about providing information and transparency to investors to allow for them to make informed decisions. And I think by any kind of movement in this space to increase this reporting compliance only adds legitimacy to the space and further allows for, as you said, a variety of diverse founders, diverse entrepreneurs, diverse ideas to get supported. So frankly, I think it's a foundational thing for us to be focusing on in this industry and getting up that compliance so that that legitimacy can only build. In terms of your other question for regulators, platforms, other people that are, let's call them monitors of some sort in this space to drive up compliance, I think what our study shows is that when comparing a couple of different major motivators to comply with annual reporting obligations, we find that enhancing the salience of the regulatory risk associated with not complying is a huge driver to get people to file their annual reports, to complete them, to post them on Edgar, to make them available to investors. Now, we also considered the economic upside, right? So prompting founders saying, hey, if you report your annual report, it might help you gather more capital in the future, et cetera. But what we found really had bite was bringing awareness to the regulatory requirements and potential risks for litigation, et cetera, enforcement in the space. And so when it comes to regulators, how to potentially implement that, we found that using just a simple email reminder that was tailored towards emphasizing regulatory risk, we could see a 20% increase in reporting compliance in a randomized field experiment. And so what we would say is a simple email reminder is going to help at least a little bit. Now, from a platform perspective, platforms can also remind issuers that they have via email, but also have the power to do due diligence in terms of those people that they bring onto the platform. So I think that's a thing we don't test directly, but certainly something that a platform could consider to encourage future compliance, other than just a reminder, considering it in potentially a due diligence process for bringing on entrepreneurs and firms to raise capital on their platform.
It does seem like a really natural area for focus is to get the intermediaries, the portals, to play a more active role. I did a Reg CF offering years ago with a portal that no longer operates, but they helped me with my filing. And the size of my offering was such I only had to file once. We filed the report, says this will be my one and only filing. I never had to do it again. But it was slick as a whistle because they did it for me. I mean, I think that's really the model I would recommend. They already have all the data, right? Or at least a lot of it. They just need an updated financial set and they can Shazam, put it together, file it. So I think there's a place there. But it seems like there are all kinds of little things they could do short of that if they wanted to either profit from it or partner with someone like King's Crowd that could do it and take a referral. I mean, all kinds of options. What do you see working from, primarily from those, the market players?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, all of this is slightly speculative. We don't per se test alternative ways of doing this. But certainly, I think to your point, most of these founders are resource constrained. Let's be honest, right? They're often small firms with just a few bodies running them. That's not the case for all, of course, but they're relatively small firms. Maybe they don't even have an accountant that works for them, or their accounting knowledge is pretty limited. And so doing this may be hard. And there are services out there, such as King's Crowd. They have a raise paper service, and I'm not here to promote them per se, but they are the folks that we worked with, which they promoted their raise paper service in the process. But there's others as well that can provide these services for typically less than $1,000 to file an annual report each year, and oftentimes much cheaper if founders are doing this earlier in the process and committing to it to help these also pretty much startups help them file it as well. So I think you're right though. Using intermediaries, platforms to help support this process as well. They have more know-how and more connections within the industry, and just helping coordinate this process certainly would help. We could also look to the regulator here a bit. And our study doesn't speak to any of these things directly, but certainly if the process was easier on Edgar to get filings up there, that it was easier to navigate and understand, I'm sure more compliance would happen. So I think there's kind of a few different angles that can be taken. What our study answers is what are motivating factors for the manager. It doesn't necessarily directly test what, let's say, barrier exists, which we're discussing now. So,
yeah, it's a great point. That Edgar system, I've been using it for 30 years, since the mid 90s when I was the treasurer of a big public company. And my good golly, it hasn't improved a bit. I think it might be worse now than it was 30 years ago. And I'm just baffled by that. 30 years of technology innovation, and the SEC is stuck in, I hope they don't come after me for saying this, but I hope they'll accept the feedback in the spirit it's intended. Please help us.
Yeah. I mean, we're all doing the best we can with the resources we have, right? And I think, this is one example of that. I think, what I found with the SEC staff that I've talked to, they're pretty open to feedback and hearing these things. I think it's just a matter of how many people they hear it from, right? And so if these things kind of bubble up, I'm sure that these things get considered. But certainly for folks, to your point, that just haven't done this many times or don't understand the intricacies are going to struggle with this relative to the the people who do it for their job every day for these, Fortune 100 companies, right? That's going to be a
Yeah.
totally different experience.
Yeah, yeah. And I guess that's where, the Edgar database was kind of, it operates around a marketplace that trades in, I think trillions of dollars total in aggregate in the public marketplace. And so that technology is designed for a marketplace that has professionals paid lots of money to handle these things. The startup market, small business market doesn't have that cash flow fluidity to cover the tech intermediaries
Yeah.
as efficiently. Yeah.
And as you know better than anyone, Devin, the annual actual capital raising in the United States is actually not coming from those S1 large corporation filers, right? It's coming from filers, not crowdfunding, Regulation CF per se, but other ones like it, right? Regulation D, crowdfunding A, these smaller firms that are raising money. Most of the flows into businesses in the United States, businesses period, is happening through these exempt transactions, which is, part of the point and motivation for this study.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Greg, this is great. We got to take a quick pause here, but folks, I'm here with Greg Burke. He is a professor at Loyola who has done a really fascinating academic paper on the crowdfunding marketplace and compliance around annual reports, a vital part of really making this marketplace work, and it's not working very well. It's an interesting insight that gives us an opportunity to say, how can we make this work better? Fascinating discussion. Listen, we're going to come back in a minute. We're going to take a break, come back, and we'll talk to Greg about his superpower. So stick around. You don't want to miss this.
Download a free copy of How to Make Money with Impact Crowdfunding, the book Sarah Hanks describes as
a fantastic overview, not just of crowdfunding investing, but of investing in general.
Andrew Savickas raved,
"This book offers unparalleled insights for anyone looking to make a difference."
Scan the QR code to get your copy.
Save the date for Super Green Live, the global event on sustainability and green innovation, January 22nd through 24th, 2026. Struggling to raise capital for your business? Unlock the power of the crowd with AI. My free guide, Crowdfunding Made Simple, walks you through every step to success. Get funded smarter, faster. Scan the QR code now for your free download.
Welcome back, everyone. I'm here today with Greg Burke. He is a professor at Loyola, and he's done this fascinating paper about annual filing compliance in the Reg CF marketplace. But we're going to shift gears now to talk to him about his superpower. Stick around. Greg, you're a remarkable guy, and I love that there is a genuine academic interest in the Reg CF marketplace because it's such and so important to me. I just love this marketplace, the social impact it has, et cetera. What is your superpower?
Yeah, it's a tough question. So in preparing for this question, which thank you for letting me know in advance, I spoke to a couple of friends and I first had my own thoughts, but I think they might have been right. And I think what I've come down to is making seemingly uninteresting, confusing, or unimportant things seem interesting, understandable, and relevant. I think that's the superpower I'm going to stick to here.
Yeah, that's a great superpower. My gosh, I think all of us would like to be able to do that better. I wonder if you could think of an example, perhaps something other than the paper you just published, although it's a brilliant example of that. We've spent so much time on that. Can you think of another example where you're able to do that?
Sure. I mean, think about the fact that right now you're having a conversation with an accounting professor, right? When you think of interesting professions, do we think about accounting professor? And yet we're taking some time during your TV show to do that. I think it can be as simple as a conversation. It can be in a presentation. Recently in class, we were talking about how do we safeguard assets, which, sounds like so boring. But we can relate it to our students by thinking about, hey, you have a roommate. What do you do with your cash? Do you just throw it on your bed? Do you hide it somewhere? Right? Things like that. When it comes to research, right? Just making it related to my work a bit. I study, academics would say, I study exempt transactions and capital formation. Again, sounds incredibly boring, but of course, that's not the angle that we take here. I think the key thing about this is thinking about your audience and thinking about what is important to them. And so a lot of this superpower is being relatable, understanding others, and responding in such ways.
Great. As you think about this now, I wonder if you would be able to share a tip or two for, doing this, making the complex, the academic, the challenging more relatable and communicating that effectively. Any tips for us?
Yeah. So I think it really comes down to your ability to reflect and your ability to observe. And so for me, it kind of starts with knowing my audience. If I know who I'm speaking to, I'm trying to communicate these things to, what's observe them, what's important to them, what's of interest to them. That's going to help me do this process. And then the next thing is I need to create the environment for things to grow, right? So creating an environment that's safe, that's open, that's genuine, where people can feel heard, and bringing that energy to the conversation. And then the hard part happens, right? The hard part happens when you understand something and you need to communicate that, and thinking about step one, right? That understanding your audience and what might be important to them and what would relate to that thing, right? So tying those things together in your brain, giving it a shot, and being brave to do that, knowing that sometimes we'll fumble. And in those cases where we fumble or even succeed, right, noticing those behaviors, noticing how people respond to you, picking up on what works and what doesn't work, and just being a human and adjusting. I think that's how I think about the process and that superpower. And hopefully that's something that other people can relate to too.
I think it's a great example, and as you think now about this paper that you just wrote, let's come back to that for a second,
Sure.
and apply this discussion a little bit directly to that. Why don't you walk us through how you did some of that, employed superpower to make that paper better, and also the part of what you did, I would note, is that you wrote an article for Superpowers for Good, our Super Crowd Voices section. The link to that story is on the screen right now, s4g.biz/Greg. But talk a little bit about, if you would, how you applied these principles to your research and your reports on it.
Yeah, I think there's a bunch of very different answers to that question. One thing I would say is, as a researcher, one thing that I try to do is tap into people that are in the real world doing real world things. It's easy for us to be highly motivated to crank out work as we read other papers and other research. But for me, I try to step back and see what other people care about, right? What do people in the larger, broader ecosystem care about? And one way, as you know, Devin, is participating in things with the Crowdfunding Professional Association, right? This is how we've met over the last year or so, going to the crowdfunding summit, seeing what people in industry care about. I think just starting from there creates fertile ground for doing research that people care about, right? Because they kind of bring it to you, right? In a sense. Beyond that, in terms of kind of writing it up, approaching it, I think always stepping back and thinking about what are some takeaways here that, as an academic, I'm comfortable saying, right? That I'm comfortable saying given the science, but also is something that anyone can grab onto.
Yeah. As we wrap up, tell people quickly how people can connect with you to learn more.
Absolutely. I would say there's, as Devin noted, there's a link here, I believe, that will connect to my Superpowers, Super Voices for Good article. I think that's a great starting point. That's approachable. It's a pretty short article that summarizes the paper and the research. There's also a link within there to the paper itself, if you really want to dive deep into it, which I'd always encourage you to do, especially any academic listeners out there. But also,
Fantastic.
you can check out my website. I have a website as well, gregory-burke.com. Find out information about me. You'll see my email there. Happy to chat with anyone about all this good
Great.
stuff.
Well, thank you very much. We wish you every success.
All right. Thanks, Devin. Pleasure to
All
be
right.
here.
Let's do some good.